Welcome to your podcast, Leadership is Tricky, where we'll tackle various topics, challenges, and experiences as it relates to your investment in leadership. So, let's design success together. Now your hosts.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Leadership is Tricky. We have Steve and you have Eric. We're back. What's
Hey
going on,
Eric, how you
Steve?
doing? I'm doing good, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm just sitting here. It's a nice rainy day. I'm in my basement. And we're just recording episodes. It's what we love to do. So um, yeah, so we're going to talk about AI, which is artificial intelligence, during this episode. And we're going to have it from a leadership lens, right? Because I just spent the last probably month or so talking extensively with companies, educators, scientists. What was the other lady? She was a marketing expert,
Okay.
right? And she ran marketing for a large company. And we've been talking about AI, artificial intelligence, and the impact it's going to have on the workforce. And what are some of the use cases out there for artificial intelligence and how hard it is to really measure, right, one's effectiveness using the capability. So I'll turn the floor over to you to get us started, and then we'll just keep going from there.
Yeah, what my hope is we're not going to have a counter going like the recent Google I/O that they just did. And I think Sundar came on at the very end and said, we said AI 120 times on this podcast. I hope we don't get even close to that.
Right.
It's still a worthy conversation to your point, Eric. Let's take AI out of the combo just for a hot minute. We'll get back to it in a second, but let's talk more about like disruption and what that means, not only with this latest technology that's going to potentially disrupt, which I think all signs point to yes, but previous disruptions to work, to life, to our day-to-day that's kind of inhibited or grown different aspects, however the way you look at it, of the working sectors of the world. The way I see AI right now as a disruption is there's a lot of promise, there's a lot of hype, and rightfully so, because right now, like I even dabble today with like Google's product that's out there, and everybody's got that free access to Chat GPT since it's gone through its maturations as well. It's pretty cool. It's got a high cool factor that I can say kind of scratches an itch from a chatbot perspective. That's really where my dabbleness, starts and ends for me.
Is that a
Um,
word?
I'm making it a word. It's live in the world now. So
I love
dabbleness.
it.
I'm gonna put it on.
Dappleness.
I'm gonna put it on some websites out there. That's how I see it today. I think what I'd love to get into today with you is it spooks people, rightfully
Right.
so. People are averse to change. We've done kind of change management-ish podcast before, so I think this is a good version two of that conversation because right now, you and I as leaders and a plethora of others that are listening to us right now, like how do you manage that reaction from the folks that are in your stead, that are working alongside you to make mission happen, yet potentially don't know if that mission is going to be available to them because supposedly AI is going to replace us all and we'll just hit buttons and everything's
Right.
going to happen, carte blanche for us. So that's how I see it right now. I think I'd like to get into more of the disruption first and foremost, and maybe a proposed question to you to start with is when something hits the ether, hits
Right.
the outside world, and you've got to bring the messaging back from a disruption perspective, like how do you first start the conversation with your team?
Yeah, I think part of it is just really understanding where you're at, right? And being able to look back to see where you've come from and where you're at, right? Because to your point, what you said earlier, right? Disruption, right? So when you talk about new technology, right? And when I say technology, I'm talking about from the guy that made fire to the, then, transition to a lighter at some point, which transitioned to a flamethrower at some point, right? Or,
You can buy one of those too. Have you seen that? I'm sorry, I'm scatterbrained, but
yeah,
you can buy like a little robot flamethrower dog. Like it's crazy.
right. So I think most technology, if not all technology, I won't say all, I'll say most technology, there was a specific use case in mind to solve a problem, to make things easier or whatever the case may be, right?
Mhm.
Because we used to write with quills on a scroll, right? Way back whenever, right? And whoever was the keeper of the scrolls was the smartest person in the world. And now when I have my iPhone, I know more than anyone that was alive in like the fifth century or you name it, right? I'm smarter than anyone from that time that used to be the keeper of the scrolls, right? So technology has its benefit, right? To help us streamline things, to help us do things differently. And I think and I say all that because I think you have to start with where you're at
Mhm.
and let people know that, hey, it's going to be okay. Things might change. However, you want to get so far ahead of it to help people through that loss that they're going to endure as we introduce this new change into their ecosystem. So when we talk about artificial intelligence and where it's at today and its maturity, yeah, it's cool, right? Yes, we can do a lot of things that are kind of mundane tasks that used to just bog us down. Things like answering email, things like streamlining processes, things like drafting memorandums and correspondence and fixing our tone of something on a memo, right? It allows people the ability to do things a lot more efficient and do things in a way that they probably could not have done without it, right? So not everyone's well versed in writing professional correspondence, but you can write what you wanted to say
Yep.
and say, hey, spit this out in a form that makes sense for the people that are going to receive it. It does it in seconds,
Yep.
right? Or it helps you get to where you want to get to faster, right? And I'll share with you my first time using AI, which was hilarious, right? I I was listening to some
We all
podcasts.
have that story. I'd love to hear this.
I was listening to some podcasts, and I heard a guy talking about generative AI, right? Which is what we know today to be like Chat GPT, right?
Mhm.
Whatever version. And the guy was like, hey, I'm having conversations with my AI and I'm training it. It's learning me, right? I can ask it anything. And I'm like, I'm going to check this thing out, right? So I downloaded it to my phone. I've got the app. I'm sitting there chatting with my thing. I probably talked to this thing for like 3, 4 hours, right? And I was so blown away. But then after several weeks of talking to my AI, I started to realize that I'm running out of use cases for this thing,
That's
right?
interesting.
Until one day someone said, hey, you should write a book, right? And I was like, man, that'd be kind of cool. I don't even know where to get started. So I asked ChatGPT, like, hey, I want to write a book. What are the steps that I need to do? Like, hey, build an outline, figure out what you want to talk about, start looking at people that can publish for you, right? Do you want art? Where do you, and I'm asking her, where do you find this art? But I'll never forget the first time I got on it, how my imagination was just firing off and I'm like all in. Like
Yeah.
nothing around me mattered in that moment that I was introduced to this new technology. But it wears off after a while because I didn't have the use cases, right? I didn't put the intellectual horsepower behind understanding what list of things I needed. So
Yeah. You said it, like, where are we right now? Take an inventory of the as is, like, what is going on right now? So, to your point, like, what are the use cases that I think it could solve for me, or the value props that this disruption could solve for me before it becomes just like, and I know we're going to get into it, but just the shiny toy that's been
right.
thrown out there to the world to say, hey, everybody go figure it out. I mean, that's where we're at right now. That's how I see it, at least.
And if you think about like all of the things that have been accelerated over the last, let's say 5 years, right? And I say five because like pre-COVID, right, where we were still brick and mortar working in buildings. There were some tools out there to do some collaboration, but just not robust enough and didn't really scale well. And then once COVID hit, right, when we all were regulated to, being cave trolls at home, right? We
And we
all these
walked a lot. We walked a lot outside. That's what we did. Yes.
right, but um, we relied on the internet. We relied on these tools like Zoom and Teams and Slack and all of these other innovations that came from it. And then even features, new features that were coming up, like whiteboarding and sharing screens and backgrounds, because you didn't want to show all the laundry you hadn't put away in 3 weeks, right? But all of these things just happened because there was actual use cases popping up every day, like, hey man, we've lived our lives up to this point just like this, and now we have to change and reframe the way that we look at work, the way that you and we talked about all the time, is like, how do we now lead in this virtual environment, right? It was extremely interesting that over that short span of time we've come so far, right? And I will tell you, here in Europe, we've come light years ahead, because before we would have to send everything via mail. They wouldn't do anything via text, via apps, none of that, right? So we've come a long way. And I think that today, if we just stop for a moment and tell people, look, this is where we're at, this is how far you've come. This is what I think some of the use cases are. This is how it'll help you. This is where, and allow people to see themselves in the transition, that I think it'll smooth things out for folks. And I would say some people are going to lose their job, right? But you can, if you're actually doing human capital management and talent management, you just reinvest those people to look at things differently for you now.
So what I love what you said is use case, where are we now? What I think also helps with the people aspect of this, because people are averse to change. I'll go back to that again. If you tell them of where have we come from, and let's pat ourselves on the back with the amount of change that we've seen in this amount of time. If it's like you just went through this eloquent description of pre-COVID, we were this way, post-COVID, we're this way. And guess what? We're all still here. We're all still alive. If not, we've actually grown the team, because now we have a data science team, and we have this team, we have that
Right.
team. These are emerging things that have come about since COVID shocked that system, and we had to make impactful change in a quick amount of time. But the other use case I go to is, you held up your phone a little bit ago, like this phone right here.
Right.
But the iPhone was introduced about what, 2007, if my
So,
memory serves
so
me
for
right.
those, this is an iPhone. That's not what he just had. So,
Yeah, I have to. I got priced out of that market. I'm sorry. I'm gonna put a little vulnerability out there, but yes, this was a follower of Apple.
right.
That phone's been around 14, 15 years. It has taken a long time for that to institutionalize some impactful change. And the one that I want to really harp on is flying in airports, and maybe in certain areas of the country and in the world. Putting a boarding pass on a phone was like the thing to do a handful of years ago. I still saw paper tickets up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And for the first time, I flew 3 weeks ago here in the States, back and forth. And I would say 90 to 95% of the people went through with their phone. It was like a revolutionary thing that I noticed and observed, and I had not seen before. And it made me very, in a way, hopeful, because I like disruption in technology. I work in technology, but it made me hopeful that people are finally getting that use case. And it's the adoption curve that we always talk about. You've got your early adopters, and eventually the middle that come aboard, and then the laggards will eventually get there. I think we're there, at least with putting boarding passes on a phone. Like, what a weird concept that was 15 years ago. And that's how I see this. If we could talk through those, not even today's use case that we want to solve, but the use cases that have been solved and you've just adopted into your day-to-day life, based on your own curiosity and getting after something, it quells it. I think it really does. And I think what I I think we're going to segue to now is like, how do you go learn how we're going to get after those use cases? Just to say them out loud is one thing, but let's go get smart now.
Yeah, I think before we pivot, is because just your use case with the airport, right? You're right. I would probably say 98 to 99% of the people are now scanning that QR code, right? But there's people out there that have no idea what a QR code is. They have no idea what an app is. They don't have any idea what it is to have a smartphone. And I go back to some of the older, more seasoned folks out there that just have not embraced a smartphone or don't have a need for it, right? Because everything's kind of done for them, or they don't really do online banking. And I think of my mother-in-law in a lot of regards. While she has an iPad, if we were to travel, she would feel more comfortable with a paper ticket, right? She wouldn't have the first idea how to download an app, how to log in online and check in online. Now, I might be selling her short. So if you listen to this, mother-in-law, I'm sorry, but um,
You might be getting a
um,
phone call tonight.
right, just with what I know, there are people out there that still struggle with the idea that they don't have that piece of paper, right? It's almost like this the ebook versus the physical book,
Hmm.
right? There's a preference, and that's okay, um, to have that. But to your point, though, I think that innovation's happening at the speed of imagination, right? And people need to, and that's trademark. So,
I was
Britta, if
about
you're
to say, like,
listening, don't take it.
you might want to not say that too many times. That's gonna be a domain.
Right. But it's happening in real time right now that people are trying to solve problems, based on the environment or the situation that they're in. If they have the skills or resources to do it, they're solving those problems. And they might not be solving a problem that everyone has, but a problem, right? And it's just a matter of how do we scale that? And we scale that through education. We scale that through letting people understand, like you say all the time, is, what's in it for me, right?
Hmm.
Answering that question. And yeah, I didn't want to pivot so quickly to the
Yeah.
use cases until, we really talked about, like, how do you manage that loss or that change that people are going to go through. And I think part of it takes time, right? When the internet first came out, it took a lot of people a long time to figure out, like, why do I even need this? What's a WWW, right? What is this? What's a domain name? What are all these other things? And I think it takes a population or a group of people a long time to really adopt something, because they're probably not educated on it. And I'm just gonna throw something else out there, and this is just my feeling. And if you disagree, please come online and say so. But when two sides aren't educated on something, right, it becomes an
Are we talking
emotional.
politics now? Like, this is an election year, man. Like,
No, we're
we're
not
going
talking
into that segue.
no, we're not talking politics, but you can overlay anything on
Oh
this, right?
man.
But when
Yeah.
I'm having a conversation with someone let's just keep it to technology, that's non-technical, right? And I'm educated on technology and they're not, right? And they say, I'll never get an iPhone, or I'm never going to do this, or I'm never going to do that, right? And I tell them about the benefits or what that technology can do for them. It's an emotional conversation very quickly, and I can't change that person's mind. What I should do instead is, hey, here are some resources you can go research, right? And then let's come back in a little while and let's have a conversation on what you feel that you've learned or what gaps you still think you might have regarding this, right? And if you're educated and I'm educated on this thing now, and we come together and we just disagree, that's just what it is, right? But we're having a logical conversation on the benefits of whatever technology it is we're trying to introduce. So I would just, that's a part of it, is really educating people and giving them the time to catch up.
Yeah, let's focus there because I mean, I want to bring this back to the workplace. Because in a free and open market, we all get to vote with our pocketbooks, and
Right.
we're talking about an organization. Let's be real. Most CEOs, senior leaders right now, AI is the buzzword. It's added to everybody's roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
It's the thing that we're going to get after in the next 1 to 3 years. It's not even a long-term roadmap item. It's the thing, like, go get after now. I want some AI. Let's sprinkle some AI on some stuff.
Right.
So even that detractor that you're describing, that's everywhere. And we have to coalesce on the problem we're trying to solve. Saying what's in it for me is part of it, I think, as well, because there are going to be a lot of bespoke, unique cases that I can customize AI to do for me. But if we can focus on the mission at hand, these are the things that we need to be quicker on or more accurate on or aggregate on. And, to give a little bit of perspective to where you work, you have a knowledge drain problem where you are because people are coming in and out of your organization by regulation and policy. Like that just happens in your organization. It's not forced, it's a thing that has to happen. So how do you get better about retaining knowledge and sharing? Like these are the use cases I think your organization could focus on, and there's a plethora of others that other teams can coalesce on. But the education is huge, giving those resources that they can consume for themselves, that they want to consume. Because I think throwing a bunch of URLs at somebody, it's only going to get you so far. You're probably
Right.
going to have to hit them with a million different channels of resources. It can be URLs to go read on demand. It could be workshops that you do in person in the organization. It could be some like beta sandbox area that you stand up and just let them go play. Non-attribution data gets wiped every so often that they can just go dabble in for those that really want to like lean into it. And then for the detractors, you might really just have to like have open office hours where they can come because it's going to happen. They have to understand that part of it at least, but it could be more one-on-one with those kind of folks, which, to bring back Apple, I think what they did really well too was the Apple Store mindset, where you could go and hire a genius to go sit down with you. And I'll be honest, my parents and my in-laws that are, you know, several years senior to me, they have not shied away from technology to that extent. Maybe when the iPhone first came out, they didn't go purchase it, but they were willing to go to an Apple store based on my recommendation, which was great that they did this. And they had an individual sit down with them and just walk them through things so they could understand, go educate themselves. And then when they were ready and felt comfortable, they could jump on board. I think that's all part of it. And that should be part of the strategy for sure.
Yeah, I think going back to your first kind of question was like spending time with people and understanding what they know today is a big part of like knowledge retention, knowledge transfer activities that you need for knowledge management in any organization, right? Because you, to your point, it's high employee turnover, not just in my industry and where I'm at, but everywhere,
Yeah.
right? My younger brother, he's 29, right? And he talks about wanting to shift jobs every 2 years because he gets bored, right? Or he's not challenged or whatever the case may be. And he's not motivated by money. I'll tell you that, right? He's motivated by challenges. Well, that's one side of the spectrum. Then you have the other side of the spectrum. Like, no, I like my routine. I'm going to sit here for, 30, 40 years. I'm going to get my pension, come hell or high water. This is what I'm going to do. And I've been doing this process forever. I think you have to tap into like the different types of people in your workforce and understand like what intrinsic what tacit knowledge do they have in their head that we can extract out, and how do we, collect that. Same thing with all of the other, artifacts, documents, all of that other knowledge that's being generated, constantly. Where do those things exist? Because I think data quality is the key to all of this,
Yep.
right? And that data quality comes in various forms. You have unstructured data, you have semi-structured data, and then you have that, really unstructured data that's sitting in someone's mind that you have to extract out. And I think that's by understanding your workforce, the different levels of competencies, what are those skills that that might be gone at some point? How do you capture all of that and get it in a way that then you can overlay the technology and show actual use case against all of that knowledge that exists now within your organization? I think part of it, to your point, is really sitting down with folks and understanding what is your interpretation of what's happening, what is your understanding and education level on this concept or technology, and then really being real with yourself, because you mentioned all the CEOs that are out there spending money. And if you guys are listening, slow down, right? Because even with the iPhone, as long as it's been out, we all use maybe less than 1% of all the features in there. And we're
Yeah.
going to be going down that path with AI, of all of these things we think we can do. And if the maturity isn't there, you're going to be blowing a lot of money on storage, data egress fees, cloud, all of that, right? So, and
We're going to make NVIDIA a lot richer, that's for sure.
hey, I can't be mad at that. I got stock in NVIDIA and I've
All
had it for
right,
a
there we
long
go.
time. Yeah,
No,
but
I
go
think you're
ahead.
you're hitting the nail on the head. And I also want to harp on quick and small wins. That's how you're going to, in my opinion, provide value to the mission and show the folks that maybe are detracting from the change at foot. If you can show them how their life is going to get a little bit easier, and or that's the what's in it for me, and or how the mission is going to be solved a little bit easier, which again, that should be a uniting force with everybody in the organization. And if
Right.
you can't do that, that's another problem that we could do another episode on. Um, I think that's where I would want to focus in on the most is like having a more, I'm going to use a buzzword, so crush me with comments or whatever, Eric, too. But agile is the right answer here. You've got to have MVPs that you roll out, test, validate, and take to fully operational or production, however you term fully operational, and get people to get hands-on earlier than later. Because if you think you're going to like solve the elephant in the room in one shot, back to the CEO problem, that's not how this is going to work. Nothing ever happens that way. And you got to take a very methodical approach. And if that means standing up like an actual change management organization to do this in your teams and not just throw it over the fence to IT to go figure it out because we think AI is IT, that's not going to win. It's not going to work,
Right.
in my humble opinion.
No, I think that's a part of it, right? That's the how we're going to get there, right? And then I think organizations need to ask themselves, like, what are you actually trying to solve? And just because sometimes you might get 1,000 use cases, and maybe one of them is the only thing we want to solve, like in an IT organization, right? To take a look at root cause analysis, or customer support tickets, and grouping them, and coming up with ways to automate chat bots, right? So you can then reduce the amount of tier one support you need. You can focus those people on tier two, right? I see all of that, right? And I just want people to really walk away from this conversation knowing that AI isn't new. It isn't new, right? I've been dealing with AI personally since 2010. Right. IBM Watson was out. I was working in an organization where we were dealing with, that technology. Even before that, I mean, you remember, guys, when, and this is probably going to date me, but like Windows NT came out, we had a little paper clip,
That
and,
Clippy, man.
right? And you can
Yeah.
ask him anything, right? And he would help you kind of understand the operating system quicker by just asking it questions. The
Yeah, just
help
maybe ahead of its time, right?
Right. He was great. He'd be annoying when you think about it. He's always there. You couldn't get rid of him. Like, hi, right. But AI is not new. It's now on a larger scale, right? We're able to crunch a lot of data a lot faster, right? Which is almost instantaneous, where it can crawl, understand your data, and then spit something back out in a coherent manner. But don't be scared, to your point, of touching it now, learning and growing with it now, right? So when the shift happens within your organization, you aren't left behind, or you're not left in a state of chaos.
Yeah.
Um, so
Well, I'd like to touch on, this factor of it's going to happen, it's on the roadmap. Maybe we do roll out those MVP type products internally to the organization and maybe to your customers to be able to get hands-on that, yeah, this is coming. We're going to be able to solve more and more problems. I think another clear communication aspect to the workforce, to the organization, is the new opportunities and new roles that could be stood up because of this disruption to our technology, our process, our people, whatever. There might actually be a net gain of humans that you're going to need
right,
because we haven't even touched on like the responsible AI nature and checking the models themselves that it's not spitting out biased or completely erroneous information after it aggregates all this tacit, implicit, unstructured, like all this minutia of stuff that's out there. Like you're going to need people to know that part of the work as well. And I think that to me is another exciting aspect. Yes, the tools are going to be the sexy part. I get my hands on it. It's going to be great. It's going to do a lot of cool stuff at a push of a button, but there's going to be a lot of humans on the loop. That's also
right,
trademark. There we go. Uh, it's not taking humans out of the loop. You're going to need new humans to be checking even that part of it as well. And if that ever gets disrupted too, that's even better, because that would be a great thing, that we would have more trust in those models and language models and all the things.
But I
Um,
would say that problem set's not new either, right? We see that in software development, all this unbiased or the biased code that's out there. So we've come up with ways to test it, right? Take a look at the code. We bounce it against cybersecurity. We do all these things, right, to make sure the code is sound and secure and is free of as much bias and prejudice as we can have. And the case in point would be there's software out there that the courts use to figure out what sentencing you might need, right? Or what your threat is back to society based on all these different factors, and then it's proven out there. And I'll find the software and share that with the audience. But yeah, at the push of a button, based on all these variables and factors, right? It tells you that this person here that's committed murder once versus this person over here that's got 15 different types of misdemeanors, right? This person that has the larger amount is a bigger threat to society. You're like, what? Right? But it's found that it's not going to be a new problem, but now it might be more focused because it's happening at a larger scale and quicker. Now you have additional people that are testing the models, they're retraining the models, they're constantly involved in the evolution of whatever that AI model is that they're pushing out. So no, that's a great point. All right, so we're at time, Steve, but what else did you want to hit on before we close?
Yeah, I think with any disruption, you got to have a plan in place before you even introduce it to the workforce. I think that's the trickiness with the leadership aspect that I'd like to bring it back to. So those that have to lead teams into this unknown world, number one, embrace it, because we've always embraced change. We live in an ever-changing world. Like, that's something that we're going to have to do, even if it's technology or a process or whatever. So make sure to bring them along. And then I think your comment earlier to those senior leaders with the pocketbooks, try not to solve world hunger in one fell swoop of, signing a check. It's just not going
Right.
to happen that way. It never has, never will.
Right, perfect. All right, team. So, hey, thanks for tuning in. If it's your first time, again, thank you for tuning in to Leadership is Tricky, and look out for future episodes. For those return listeners, thanks for being loyal listeners to Leadership is Tricky. If you have comments on this, go ahead and send me an email at Eric, ERICK, at leadershipistricky.com, all one word. I know it's long. Or go to leadershipistricky.com and use the new chat feature. It's
That's
not
an AI
AI.
error? Oh, man.
Yeah, use the new chat feature. Send us a note. We'll get the email, and then we'll get a response back to you, or leave leave your thoughts in the comments below. All right. So, all right, Steve. Thanks.